Good
The
morning,
the Gemara that we're learning,
Good morning.
I must say, is a very practical Gemara because when you go checking out your lulav and esrogim, you're going to the you go to the store where they sell it, and you have to make sure that number one, you're not getting ripped off, but more importantly, you're not getting a puzzle, you're not getting something invalid. So you have to, you want to know what you're buying. So you need to know what to look for and what's the important things in a lulav. And so this Gemara, often we learn Gemaras that aren't so practical. This Gemara does have a lot of practical elements to it. And what's makes it complicated is that there are a lot of different commentaries of how they're understanding the cases. So, and it seems in Shulchan Aruch like the ideal is to try to get the best, that you're covering pretty much all your bases, that according to all the views, this is considered a good lulav. Now, after the fact, or if you don't have other options, fine. You could get away with a lot of these cases end up being permissible, but there is a preferable way of having a lulav that doesn't have any of these scenarios that are even if it says that it's kosher, but doesn't mean it's ideal to use. It's still there's nicer and there's better, and there also could be opinions that it might be problematic. So we're gonna start again from Lamed Aleph Amud Beis 31b on the bottom. Niktam Roishoy. And I'd like to go through the Gemara with maybe some of the commentaries as well, and we'll see the different ways of learning, these cases and the laws and the halachas. Then we'll be able to see how it develops into Jewish law. So the Gemara says, like, there were two lines up from the bottom on 31b. Niktam Roishoy. Niktam Roishoy means that the top was clipped. Gemara says that it brings the Mishnah's case that Niktam Roishoy, if the top is clipped, again, this is like really at the bottom of 31b, two lines up from the bottom, and it's quoting the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said that Niktam Roishoy is invalid puzzle. The Mishnah combined the case of Niktam Roishoy, where it's clipped, where the top of it is clipped, with Nifritzu Olav, with the leaves being somehow separated. The way Rashi seems to learn it is they're actually totally detached and they're just tied together. So that's the second case. So Niktam Roishoy is one case in this category, and Nifritzu Olav is the second case, and both of them are puzzle or invalid. Rashi says Niktam Roishoy is invalid because it's not hadar, it's not beautiful. That's the reason for this. But that's the law. Niktam Roishoy, the Mishnah says, is invalid. Now, Amar Rav Huna says, Lo shano ela niktam. The Mishnah only picked a case where it's clipped. Aval nistak kosher. But cracked is kosher. Now, what is this case of cracked, nistak? So Rashi says it means nistaku roshe ha'olin, that the tops of the leaves have been split. So what the understanding seems to be, the way Rashi is learning it, that this is talking about not just one leaf, but the majority of leaves, because Rashi uses a plural, Roshe Ha'olin. Rashi says the tops of the leaves have been split. And if that's so, if he's learning that way, seemingly he's learning Niktam Roishoy, that the top is split. Seemingly he's learning there as well that it means plural, the majority of the leaves tops have been split. And that is understandable, that many laws of the Torah go by majority. So again, so we have here the Mishnah said a case niktam roishai, that the top is split, is cut off, excuse me, the top is clipped off. And on those words, interestingly enough, Rashi doesn't say anything. On the Mishnah, he doesn't clarify what that means. He just says it's puzzle because it's not hadar, it's not beautiful. So that's where the top is clipped. And then the Gemara says, well, if it only mentions the top is clipped, that's the case of, that's niktam. That's where it's clipped. It's invalid. But if it would be nistak, if it would be split, then it's kosher. So clipped is invalid, but split is kosher. And Rashi says about split that it means the majority of the leaves are split. The majority of the leaves are split, it's going to be kosher. That's what it implies from here. Only niktam is it's cut off, it's a problem. They're cut off. So the understanding that I'm sharing with you is that nistak, Rashi says we're talking about plural. It's going on many of the tops of the leaves have been split. So it would make sense that Rashi is continuing to explain similar to the case of niktam, similar to the case where it's clipped. It also means they're clipped off. It's also talking about the majority of the leaves. Why Rashi says it here on nistak? It would seem he's trying to explain what's split. So he explains that it's the leaves are split. And while he's saying that it's the leaf is split, he's saying plural leaves. You know what I mean? So in other words, what was split? So he tells us it means the tops of the leaves, but his understanding of that it's the plural. And in other words, the majority of the leaves of the lulav have been split. So according to Rav Huna, what it sounds like is if the majority of the leaves have been clipped off, invalid. If the majority, meaning the top of the leaves, we're not talking about you cut off all the leaves, we're talking about the tops of the leaves. Diktam roishai, it says the tops, the heads, the top of it is clipped off, it's invalid. If the majority of the leaves have been split, that's kosher. Jeffrey, is that you agree with that?
I just don't see that Rashi.
Oh, nistak is 3 lines up from the bottom of 31b, from the bottom of the Rashis, 3 lines up. Nistiku Roshei He'olin.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that I'm looking at Niktam Rosho. It's way in the middle, right? Niktam Rosho in my version is in the middle of the Rashi. Then there's after there's Nifritzu Alav, and it doesn't say anything about Nistiku.
Yeah, because you're on page 29b probably.
Okay.
I'm on page 31b.
Okay, thank you. I went back to the Mishnah.
And yeah. So okay. So here, this is the understanding that the majority of the leaves have been split. I would like to just add one point, and that is that it seems to me that you have to add on one concept here, and that is that the Gemara later is going to say nechlaka hatiyomis, where the middle leaf gets split. It's going to talk about that later. Now, being that the Gemara is going to talk about that and ask a question, what's the law there? So how does that flow with what we're talking about here, nistak, where we're talking about majority are split, and then we're talking about the middle one is split. So what it seems like the way Rashi is learning is that although we're talking about the majority are split, but we're not talking about the middle one. The middle one is almost like a category of its own. So here we're talking about the majority of the leaves are split. We're not talking about the middle one. If the middle one is split, you don't need the majority, maybe, or it falls into another category, the middle one. And the reason for that would make sense, that it has to do with the fact that's much more visible. The top one extends beyond the others, so that will be subject to some discussion later. The way Rashi is learning it, it would seem to be connected to Nistak when it mentions there about the Tiyomes is Nechla. It would seem to be the very similar thing. It's just that there we're talking about the middle one, and here we're talking about the roiv, the majority of the leaves, the tips of the leaves. Jeffrey, do you want to say something?
Yes. So my understanding is the middle one is from the shidra. It's still part of the spine, and the other leaves are the ones that are on the left and the right of the spine, and that's why that part is considered different. But if it says niktam rosho, that means that part is what's cut off.
So, so what you're saying is that it's you want to call the middle one the part of the spine. I'm not sure if you could say that. The Gemara itself uses a different term. It calls it a tiyomus.
Yes.
And it and the term often is used that the spine ends and the tiyomus begins. So I don't know if you would call it really part of the spine, but I think the logic behind it is more logical than just the fact that we're calling it a spine, but rather that it's visible. But maybe we'll see. Maybe we'll see other insights. There are a number of different opinions of how to learn this. So I'm trying to. Trying to make it clear. This is the way Rashi seems to be learning, that niktam is the majority of the leaves are clipped off. Nistak is the majority of the leaves, the tips of the leaf. At least the majority of the leaves have been are split. And what it really means is that every leaf is folded over. Every leaf of a lulav is folded over, and often where it folds over, by that fold, it actually splits there. It's very common for it to split there, and that's what the Gemara is talking about. And Rav Huna says it's kosher. And now the Gemara asks, the nistak kosher? And is nistak, if it splits there, is it really kosher? Well, Hatanya, didn't we learn in a brisa, lulav kafuf, a lulav that is bent over, that is bent. And we'll get to that soon. Kavutz, if it is kavutz, it has these type of kaitzim. It has like little thorns coming out of it throughout the length of the lulav. Or another pshat, kavutz, Taisus over here says, ba'aruch perish inyan smisa, that it's shriveling. That's what the way Taisus learns. Kavutz, a lulav that's shriveling. So that's another translation. Sadok, and here is the main point of the brisa. Sadok means that it is split, and then it says another case, okum, it's bent. Doimelamagel, similar to a sickle. Puzzle, it is invalid, and these cases are one category. And the brisa continues, and it says another case, charus. Charus means that it's kosher. It is hardened, which means the frond became hardened. And what happens as the lulav grows, as a palm branch grows, it gets the spine gets harder and the leaves spread apart. And that's what it's doime. I'm sorry. So that's the charus. So charus means it has hardened, and the leaves basically have spread apart. So that is invalid. Puzzle, it's invalid. Doimel charus, but if it's only similar to charus, to that stage where it's hardened, it's beginning to harden. So it's similar to the charus, but has not yet reached the stage where the spine of it has become hardened like wood, and so it's not yet at that stage. It's kosher. It's still kosher. And the main reason we brought this brisa is for the one word saduk and the word puzzle. It gives a case and it gives a law. Saduk is puzzle. And that contradicts what Rav Huna just said, that nistak is kosher. So Rav Huna wanted to say nistak is kosher, and the Brisa says sadok is pasul. That sounds to be a strong contradiction. It's either kosher or pasul, two extreme opposites. And the Rav Papa comes along to answer this. Amar Rav Papa says the Ovid kehemnik, that the Brisa that says it is invalid is not talking about the tips of the lulav, of the leaves. It's not talking about the shedra, the spine. The spine is split, but rather what it's talking about is that it's made like a hemnek, which is this type of utensil that is used used by a cipher that has a very sharp point, or a sharp 2 points, and it is almost like a Y shape or a V shape type of utensil, and that's how the lulav is shaped, and therefore it's split. It's
Rabbi, there's a picture.
Just 1 second. Let me just finish. So it's made like a hemnik, and this is what we are talking about. And the way Rashi explains it is that the lulav grew. This is not something that happened to the lulav afterwards, but rather it has grown that way from the beginning. Kach gidel halulav. This is very important. Rashi learns that it means that it actually grew this way, and it grew into almost like it's two different spines, because the leaves separate, making it look like there's two separate spines from the lulav. So this is very different than nistak, which we were talking about before, where the majority of the leaves split. Here we're talking about saduk, which means that there's a lulav that has a major split inside, or it has some level of split inside the in between the leaves, which it grew that way. So it's not that it became that way; it grew that way. That's when it's invalid. This is the way Rashi is learning that. That's what kehemnik is. That's what the brisa, when it says saduk, it means that it grew in a way that it's separated into two parts, into like it has two, almost like it has two shedras. So that's the answer of the Gemara. So the conclusion is, what's the law with nistak when the leaves, a majority of leaves are split? That's kosher. If it's divided into two and it grew that way, that's when it's invalid. Okay, now I'm not sure, and the reason I wanted to stop you for a second, David, is I just want you to know there's a lot of interpretations of the Gemara. I was trying to learn it now with Rashi's shot, so I'm not sure the picture you're going to show, but I'm hoping that it's according to the way we've explained it. If not, maybe wait till we explain other opinions, and then you'll show that picture. David?
Yeah, I'll show you the picture.
Okay.
Please, you have to delete it.
Oh, that's the hemnik. Oh, I thought you were showing us a lulav. Oh, okay. All right. That's a two-pronged fork used by the Persians as an eating utensil. So that's the way Rabbeinu Hananel seems to learn it. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if Rashi meant the same thing. In other words, we're trying to use an example of a cipher, what a cipher uses, and they're talking about like what the Persians would use.
Fork.
I'm not sure, like a fork. Yeah, I mean, so that's another shot. That's okay, fine. I was picturing
An
it a little
example
different.
of an hemnick.
Yeah. Anyway, it's similar. Either way, however you learn it, it's similar. But I was picturing something different. Okay. Thank you, David, for showing us that. Yeah, that's.
Do you have a definition also in the inner margin to the right of Rashi? I have another explanation there. Also,
You have an explanation really on
it's
side?
in the inner margin to the
Uh-huh.
right of Rashi.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I don't have it. What do you have
Yeah.
there? Read it. Read it to us.
So it says, "Hu kli sheyesh bo shnei roshim, v'chein lulav sheshnei hutzin ho elyonim shehen tumas im nifredu ze mizeh."
Yeah, that's the Masorot Hashas.
Yeah,
So I have that. I don't know what it's going on. Oh, it's on the Gemara, not on Rashi. I have a little aleph that knocks me to this Maseres Hashas, which you just read. Yeah, I didn't look at it before. This is a kli that has two, so it's trying to explain what it is. So
right.
it's erech, it's using the aruch, the erech himnik. So it says it's a kli that has two ends, and the lulav has two hutzin hel yoinim shehim tiyoimes im nifredu zemizeh. Okay, so that is a different pshat. That's not explaining Rashi's pshat. That is a different pshat, and it's mentioned as he quotes the Aruch. It's also mentioned that pshat from the Meiri, and that is another way of learning. That
What is Rashi's shot then?
It
Exactly.
has two
what is
heads.
Rashi's pshat?
Yeah.
Rashi's pshat is that we are talking about, strangely enough, not a lulav that the leaves split, and not a lulav that the shedra split, but that the lulav grew in a way that it branched into two separate pieces, separate directions. Now,
So you're saying
that
from
is
the
not
very
common.
base?
It's so hard to hear
the
you.
root?
No, it doesn't say exactly. Yeah, I mean, it somehow grew that way. It somehow grew, from wherever it's there. The leaves are attached to the shedra, to the spine. They've somehow split, and it looks like, and it grew that way. Now, what Rashi talks about, the case is not uncommon to have that after you shake it a while, it sometimes does split a little.
I understand. I
know?
have two trees in front of my house. They
Uh-huh.
both go with a single bark up for about 20 feet.
Uh-huh.
And then one splits into two, and the other one splits into three. Now, I'm not just talking about branches. You'll come by later, you'll look at it.
I'll have to take a look. Yeah, that's
It
interesting.
actually, the growth is like that. So the idea doesn't have to be that it's growing from the base, from the ground, and you got two trees.
Right.
But
Right.
that
No.
it started growing up, and then it split into two.
Right, but we are talking about a lulav that so we are talking about a branch, not like the trunk of the tree. We're talking about a branch of the tree, a branch that it actually splits into two. And for some reason, why Rashi learns this way, I mean, it is hinted to maybe from the fact that the Brisa uses the word sodok. Why does it have to be grow that way? Why does he have to learn that
But it's growing that way? Because once it starts out as a single and then it keeps growing in two.
Yeah. Yeah, but why can't the same law apply if you shook it a lot?
That's different. We're not talking about you changing it. We're talking about Hashem. Its natural growth was like that.
Yeah, I'm saying that it grew sort of like separated. Now it happens. It's common to happen that the branch will separate after you use it for a while, but to grow that way, it's not so common.
Right.
So that's all I'm saying.
Right.
That it's not the common.
But the idea that the pictures that he was showing before of the two-pronged fork could very well be. It starts in one and then it keeps growing.
Yeah, except that the picture I imagined was more like a V, not the way he had it like an H. He had it more like an H shape. I was thinking more like a more
Why?
separated.
Like a
And
Y.
yeah, more like a Y. And the Rashi does not say this was a fork. Rashi says this was something used by Seifrim, with two
Right,
ends,
because they
which,
had a tool.
which is different. So it's a
We
little
started
different
looking
than
for,
that.
but it also
Okay.
looked like
It's,
a
it's similar.
two-pronged fork. You
It's
had a
similar.
handle, and then you had the 2 points that carved it into the leather.
And leather, right? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's not that far off. I just don't. I just didn't think that was the picture
Uh,
that fit Rashi. You
now
know
I'm
what I
trying to
mean?
understand. You making a big
Right.
deal. This is
Right.
not Rashi. This is not Rashi. And I'm trying to see
Okay.
what's the big difference with
Yeah.
Rashi.
No, that's not a big difference. But the pshat, what really is a big difference is what Jeffrey was bringing from the Maseres Hashas. That's very different than Rashi. How is that different than Rashi? That is a big difference because Rashi is learning that the case of Kehemnik, in the case of which is the Gemara's explanation of the Bryce's case, Saduk, is not talking about a split in the branches in the leaves of the lulav. It's not talking about a split in the leaves of the lulav. It's talking about a split between the leaves. In other words, it's not a split within one leaf where one leaf goes one way, one leaf goes. Rashi's learning that there's a split. Some leaves go one way and the other leaves go the other way, but not
Yes.
within one leaf. Each leaf is either going in one. The leaf itself is going in one direction, but some of the leaves happen to be going to the right. Some of the leaves are going to the left. The way the Aruch is learning is that you have a split, and the Tiyomis, this middle leaf, the middle leaf that has two pieces to it, they are dividing into two directions. That it's specifically the top one that's dividing into two. It's the split of it's the split
center leaf.
the center leaf that's dividing into two. Let me just pull this up over here. 1 second. Hemnif. Yeah. As I mentioned, that's the Meiri and that's the Aruch, that it's that the two upper leaves that are attached, which is the Tiyomis, are split. And so being that they're so that's that's the way the Aruch and the Meiri seem to want to learn. That they're split in a way, a direction, the amount of that it would be kehemnik, that they are going in different directions, and so I guess it would be a machlokes. I guess it is, Isaac. Just to touch on what I was telling you.
Yeah.
If you do learn that way, there's a big difference if they're split in a way like a fork, or if they're split in a way like a Y shape. It does actually make a big difference in halacha, how you learn. If it's, the way, how that Aruch is learning. So the Aruch is learning that it's just the way the Aruch seems to be understanding it is that it's this fork. And then he learns that that's what himnik, that the case is that it's the top two leaves that are attached and they split. So if they are separated like the amount that a fork separates, according to the Aruch, that would be invalid.
Tassels,
So that is just anyway.
Yeah.
So now I do want to mention that the Torah questions Rashi. The Torah is the son of the Rush, and he says nistak roisha, it's kosher, but it's gehimnik then it's going to be puzzle. He says Rashi learns it means tchilas briyosai, the beginning of the way it grew was this way, that it grew into like two divisions, and half go to one side, half go to the other. And lashon nistak doesn't sound that way, he says. And anyway, so he says rather it's that it's nistak be'emtzeisa yad sheniftach. So he says that it doesn't have to, that it's not that it grew that way, that rather that it became that way. Shenistak be'emtzeisa, it spread apart until it opened, and that's the way the Torah learns. So in other words, according to the Torah, there are more examples where it will be invalid if your lulav is breaking apart, and it's separating into two. Even though it didn't grow that way, it would still be invalid. Okay, so that's the way the Torah learns, arguing on Rashi, making another little more strict, another like chumrah. Okay, so far we've got nistak, we've got the case nistak, the way we translated it to mean the majority of the leaves are split. The case of niktam was the majority of the leaves are clipped. We have the case where it's kehemnik. In that case is where they grew in a different direction. The lulav started splitting into two different directions, probably one to the right, one to the left, and that is where it's invalid. The niktam was invalid. In this case of saduk is also invalid, but the case of nistak we said is kosher, is kosher. Then the Gemara continued. Now I did mention yesterday, I just wanted to go over that we also mentioned the case where it's kafuf. In kafuf, I mentioned there's a machlokes, is an argument. What does it mean, kafuf? Does kafuf mean that the top leaf has been bent? The top of the leaf the top leaves have been bent over, which is what we call a kneppel on the top of the lulavim, and you'll find very often a lot of lulavim have that. That is topic of discussion. According to, if you learn that this means a kneppel, then it will actually mean that it's puzzle, it's invalid. If that's the way you learn this brisa to mean that, it would mean that a kneppel would be invalid. The other way of learning is that it doesn't mean the top of the leaves, rather it refers to the much more than just the top of the leaves, that it's folded over, bent over. That's when it's kafuf and it's invalid. So these are the according to the Rosh, the kneppel, where just a little of the leaf folds over, bends over, that's actually a good thing, he says. And he says, I love having a kneppel because it makes sure that it's completely attached. So that was the Rosh's way of understanding the Gemara, that it's talking about that it's much more than just the leaf is bent over. But there is such a pshat that it means that it's a kneppel, and therefore some people are machmer not to use a kneppel. Yes, Mordechai.
Or a house upstate, there's a tree in the front, and at the base of the tree, there's like another like miniature tree like coming out of the base of it.
Uh-huh. And oh, so you're saying that's similar to this hemnik? That it's similar to the hemnik, right? But the thing is that really what we're talking about is the actual branch of the lulav is split in two, not that
Right.
There's one, different branches. But yeah, okay. Anyway, so the way the Torah writes this law of kafuf about where it's bent over, the Torah writes that the shedra, the actual spine is bent. That's the way the Torah writes it. So anyway, so these are the opinions about kafuf when it's invalid. So bottom line is, this is a very practical halacha, and I know in Lubavitch they're makbid, according to this, not to have a kneppel, not to have a lulav that has a bent over on the top. Although the Rosh holds that this is a good thing, but At least the other opinion says that it would be invalid. So
Okay.
you want to be machmer, you know, there is such a chumrah not to use it.
Rabbi,
Yes, that's right. Yes.
for those of us who are not Yiddish inclined, what does kneppel mean?
Isaac, well, isn't that a button? I think it means a button.
Yeah. Right.
Button, a little like
Isn't a
it's
kneppel a
used
button?
to refer to like a little spud. I don't know how to describe it.
It's a rounded. It's like rounded
Button,
off.
right?
Looks like a button on top of the lulav.
A kneppel is a good. Yeah, that's a good word for it.
I think it means a
Just-
button.
Right.
I don't know. They use the term kippa. I don't know who gave who gave it that name, but it's rounded on the top instead of pointed.
Something that holds, because it goes into the hole and it holds the clothing together.
Yeah,
so
no,
that's why.
Yeah, but I'm saying why does the top of the lulav have that term kneppel?
Right. My problem is that I'm watching the shear on my phone, so I can't use it to play with.
Yeah, the Rebbe used to talk about two poos and the
It puts in the kneppel, right?
right.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the case of kaffa. We did kaffa. We did kavutz. Now kavutz, how common is kavutz? That's very uncommon. But saduk is what we were dealing with, and then akum doimelamagol. Now this is interesting because everyone, of course, is very machmir to make sure their lulav is straight, but a sickle is very, very rounded. So to think that you're gonna, let me just mute everyone here. Sound, that's background noise. To think that your lulav is going to be invalid because it's it has a little it's not exactly straight, seemingly that's not going to be invalid. It's to get it invalid like a magel, like a sickle, is going to be quite a bend to make it that bent. But of course, there's an inyan to do hidur mitzvah, and once you're paying your price anyway for the lulav and esrog, you may as well get a nice straight one. So in other words, of course, there's an idea to get a very straight one, but it seems to me, I guess we'd have to look in Shulchan Aruch, just see, how it's drawn in Shulchan Aruch about the law of a magol, of a, because to me, it sounds like it's very rare. I don't think that any of the esrogim stores would even sell you. They would not even put out there if it was rounded like a magol, like a sickle. Let's just take a look here. So he doesn't use the word, the Alter Rebbe does not use the word kemagol, but he does say im nekam lefonov ad shenasis shidrosi kigav baal chatoteres, like a hunchback. If it's like the back of a hunchback, it is puzzle. She'ein zeh hidur. And also if it's bent to the sides, it's puzzle. So I'm not sure to what extent that means Baal Chatiteres, but I'm guessing that would be much more than the way the lovim you buy in the store. I don't think you're going to find them to be bent to that extent. But nevertheless, of course, there's definitely an inyan. In principle, you should try to get the best and the nicest for the mitzvah. So of course, you should try to get real straight. Yes, Jeffrey.
I've seen very long lulavim, and they're not perfectly straight. They go off a little bit like that. It's not totally over. It's a little bit like that. And it's that rounding that he's referring to. If it's very long,
but it doesn't seem to me like that would fall into this category where it would be puzzle.
I think they wouldn't put it out if it really was in that category. I really don't think they're all out to get us.
Right,
and
right.
The sellers.
No, it's not that they're out to get you. They don't check a lot of times. They don't look at the lulavim. They just put the boxes there. So, but nevertheless, the distributor who the original seller is not going to put something that's obviously not a lulav in there, But yeah, so seemingly that would not be a common type of situation. Now, then they talked about the chorus and the doimel chorus. These are also very rare. You're not going to have lulavim that are spread out already when you're buying them. They're not going to look like a palm frond. So those are really not common. Okay, and then we talked about the hemnex, and now we're up to the okum doimel magul. Okay, so now we're on page 32. 32a, and we're at the third line. 32a, third line. Back to the Gemara. Okum doimel magul. The Brisa had said that if it's bent similar to a sickle, Amar Rava loy amran elo lefanav. So Rava qualifies this and says that this law only applies in the front when going forward. In other words, if you're putting the spine of the lulav facing you, it's right in front of you, the spine. So then if it bends forward, that would be when it's going to be invalid if it's similar to a magul, to the sickle. But but if it goes backwards, briyasehu, that is the way it grows, and that is going to be kosher. Amar Rav Nachman said, "L'tzadin." If it goes to the side, if it's bent to the side, kilofan of dummy, that's similar to if it goes in front of you. If it bends to the side, it's similar to in front of you, and that would be invalid. V'amri law, and some say the opposite. Kila achar of dummy, it's like it goes to the back. Kila achar of dummy. Now, to me, it's a little surprising, and I don't see any commentaries on this, but seemingly, if the reason why the going to the back is okay is because briyasehu, that's the way it grows, that's the common way that it grows, what are you going to say about the side? If it goes to the side, is that the common way it grows? I don't think anyone's going to, is that the difference here? In other words, what are the two ways of learning Rav Nachman's statement? Why would anyone say that it means that it's kila achar of dami and it's kosher? If it goes to the side, it would seem like it should be, also it's not briyasehu, it's not the normal way it grows. Is that the question? If it's the normal way? If it grows,
the way they translate it in the Davidson Talmud, the Kashinsky online Sefaria.
Okay.
He says the legal status, Rav Nachman said, the legal status of a lulav that is curved to either side is like that of a lulav that is curved forward, and it is unfit. Some say its legal status is like that of a lulav curved backward, and it is fit.
I already translated. My
Right.
question is, what's the logic behind it to say that it's permissible? My logic is that it should be invalid like the first way. I'm trying to understand how you would learn that it's kiliyachara. Is there a reason to say that it grows that way? That's the derech that it grows. It shouldn't grow that way. It should grow straight. All the lulavim we see grow straight. They go a little backwards. So that I see what the Gemara is saying, that it's liacharav. But how would you say that if it goes to the side, it should have the law kila'acharav, and that's the normal way it grows? Again, I'm trying to fit the reasoning into the tzaddim, into the same reason of liacharav doesn't seem to fit with litzaddim. So the only thing I could think of is why someone would, why you might think that is maybe because Rava only said lefanav and he didn't say, well, he didn't say either. He said lefanav liacharav. He left it vague. No, I don't know. To me, it seems surprising how you would say that it's kosher. Now in Shulchan Aruch they say it's not kosher, but in Shulchan Aruch it says that litzdadim is also a problem, which makes sense to me because of briyase. But how did Rav Nachman? How were there some that said that it's kiliacher of dummy. That I don't know. Okay, now we'll go further. This lulav that it ends with one, that all the leaves, with one group of leaves, meaning they're all on one side, is balmumhu pasul. That's considered a balmum. It's has a blemish and it's invalid. So that's the statement of Rava, that a lulav that's all chad hutza, it's invalid. Now I do want to mention there is another shot, another interpretation of what he means with chad hutza, that the leaves are not doubled. The majority of the leaves, high lulav the solik b'chad hutza, that each of the leaves, or the majority of them, are end with only one leaf and not two, not a double leaf. That is considered invalid. It's a balmum. So that's another interpretation to this. Okay. Nifritzu olav. Now comes the next case, Nifritzu olav, that the Mishnah had said that if the leaves have been separated from it. Now, the way we translated it with Rashi was that they separated completely, and then you tied them together with some type of a material that you attach them. You tied the leaves back to the lulav. So maybe with a piece of lulav string, lulav leaf. So you tied it back together, so that is going to be invalid, puzzle. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Papa says, Nifritzu diavad ki chufya. Nifritzu means that you made it like a broom. And the understanding is that the broom, you have many leaves, and the leaves are detached, and then you attach them together to make a broom. So the same thing is for the lulav. You had detached leaves from the lulav, and then you attach them together, and it's not considered kosher. Rashi says it's einoi hodar. Now, Rashi said that on the Mishnah. Rashi said, "Nifrit." 1 second. What did Rashi say on the Mishnah? Nifritzu olav v'lav hodar. Says it's not considered hodar. Now, I should mention that Teves over there learned a different pshat, and Teves learned that Nifritzu olav it's talking about that the two leaves that are in the middle of the lulav, the two leaves that are
when you say two leaves, it's really considered a center leaf that is comprised of two halves. Because they're not two leaves that are stuck together, it is you're peeling it apart. It naturally travels with its partner. Even if you take it apart, they naturally stay together.
So what should we use? What's the word? What's the term?
I don't know. I'm looking.
A double leaf. Double leaves. Okay.
Well, that is the leaf. That's the center leaf. You consider it as one leaf.
Okay, but here we're talking about all the leaves. The way Teves learns is the leaves are not separated like Rashi. They didn't separate from the lulav. What does it mean nifritzu olav? It means they've all been separated from their being double. Each leaf that's two has been separated from being double. And nifritzu means they are divided in the majority of the areas. So that's the understanding of Teves. It's based on the Teves in the Teves over here on 29b, where the Mishnah nifritzu, and Teves over there he brings that mashma kain. The Gemara says it's not mashma, based on a Gemara later that he says it doesn't seem like they are separated. They're still attached, but he wants to learn
Here
that.
he keeps using the term severed. Rav Papa says severed means that the leaves were completely detached.
Okay, so that's Rashi's shot. That's Rashi's. He's learning
Right.
Rashi's shot. I'm just sharing with you Taisvis that he says it means that the leaves have been the majority of the leaves have been split. That's the
Right.
way Taisvis is learning Nifritzu. That Nifritzu means that the majority of the leaves have the double leaves have been split into singles now. They are no longer doubles. Okay, and then there's also the explanation of another explanation here. Nifritzu is that the leaves are not split, but they're hanging. They're hanging down towards the bottom. So they're nifritzu. They've separated, but they're still attached. But they're separated to the extent that they're not even holding up. Like they're wilting to the bottom. So that's a third interpretation of what nifritzu is. So we have three interpretations here. And Rav
I
Papa
don't know
says,
if you take a lulav, and I've done this more as a kid than anything, but ripping it apart down to the spine, you see exactly what they're talking about, because the top part it's like two leaves and it just comes, and you can leave it like that, and it's not hanging, but it's still sitting there like that, hanging by that base.
right.
That
The thing
holds
is that, yeah. So the thing is that Rashi, that the Rambam actually learns that that's the case here, nifritzu, and it's actually puzzle. If you did
Right.
separate the majority of leaves like that,
Right.
okay. Fine. Anyway, there's a few interpretations what nifritzu is, and the Rav Papa says it means that you made it like a chufya, like a broom. The nifridu means the ifrude. They are not separated. They are not detached. Excuse me. They're separated, but they're not detached. They're not tightly. They're not tight. They're not tight.
They jut outwards, is what they say here.
Okay, very good. So the question is, so how is that kosher? That they're not exactly attached. So the rule is that the fact that they are potential, they could be pushed together. They're not hardened. So that allows it to be kosher. That's the understanding that, in other words, it doesn't have to be that it's actually together, but it's that it's potentially that it could be together, similar to what we said before about doimel lacharus. That charus was they hardened, and that you can't, if you push them together, they're gonna crack. So there it was invalid. But if it's just becoming that way, doimel lacharus, that was the previous thing. So here is very similar. If rude ifrad, if they're just nifradu, they're attached. They're still attached, but they're not exactly tight. They're jutting out. They're jutting out. So then it's going to be kosher. By Rav Papa, now comes the question of Rav Papa, and this is the most practical thing that a very practical law. By Rav Papa nechlaka hatiyomes, if the middle leaf, the way Rashi learns this, is the middle leaf that is doubled. If this middle leaf is divided, and the way Rashi learns, interestingly enough, is the question is if it's divided all the way down into the shedra. That's the case. Again, nechlakat yomis, if you want to see Rashi on 32a, it's the two alin el yoinim emtsoyim shasham hashedra kola. He says the two middle parts of the leaf that's where the shedra ends. Jeffrey, this is what I was quoting for you. The shedra ends there, and the tiyomis is called the tiyomis, where the spine ends, and the tiyomis is the leaf part continues growing out of that spine. The final, the uppermost leaf that grows out of the spine is called the tiyomis. It's where the shedra ends. Nechlaku zemizeh, in these two upper leaves these two parts have divided. V'nistika hashedra ad ha'olin shalamata mihen. It's split all the way down into the shedra, into the spine. I'm just reading Rashi here, until the leaves that are below it. So they've gone all the way down, jutted into the split has jutted into the spine to the extent that it's already gotten to the place where the leaves below the second, not the middle leaf, but the leaves that are going out of the side, it has reached that place where they're leaving from. Where the leaves are leaving from, that's where this split has reached to. That's the way Rashi learns Nechlaka Hatiyomis.
Rabbi,
Yes.
if I can share a screen, there is a very interesting note that explains it.
Okay. I have a feeling it's going to be a different shot, like Teves, but we'll see. Okay.
We'll work it through. Identifying it then is fun too.
Okay. So which one do you specifically think is appropriate? The second one?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are many opinions with regard to this flaw in a lulav called Nechlaka Hatiyomis. In the Bikurei Yaakov, 8 are listed. However, if one considers the different explanations for each opinion, the number of possibilities is even greater. How does that work? If there are 8 flaws, how do you have even more? If one considers the different explanations for each opinion, the number of possibilities is even greater. Okay. The following are the primary
beginning. Yeah. No, he starts from the beginning because even with Nifritzu, he immediately explains there are 3 versions. So you start with that. By jumping, we started a little too late.
Yeah, well,
it doesn't connect.
No problem. We'll start with that. Okay, so we have 2 minutes left. Let's see if we can just finish this note before the end of the class. So Nifritzu Olav, I'm going to start from the top one. Among the many explanations suggested, there are 3 primary explanations. Some explain that the leaves are completely disconnected from the lulav, and one attaches them in the manner that one attaches palm leaves to fashion a broom. That's Rashi, which we said. Others maintain that the leaves do not run upward along the length of the spine, rather protrude to the sides or even sag as though they are about to fall. That's the Rambam, which we said. And yet others hold that the leaves split lengthwise into 2 or more parts. That's what we said with Teves. So we basically said all 3 interpretations of Nifritzu, even without the Steinsaltz. We pulled it off. We didn't do a bad job. Okay, now comes the next one. Nechlaka Hatiyomis. The twin leaf, the central twin leaf is split. There are many opinions with regard to this flaw. Bikurei Yaakov has 8. However, if one considers different explanations, each opinion, the number of possibilities is even greater. The following are the primary opinions. Okay. So the Goinim, as their opinion is understood by many authorities, among them the Beis Yosef, hold that a lulav with its central twin leaf split is a lulav with 2 leaves at the top. That a lulav hold the Goinim, as their opinion is understood by many authorities, among them the Beis Yosef, hold that the lulav with its central twin leaf split is a lulav with 2 leaves at the top.
Yeah.
Unlike the standard lulav, which has only 1. So yeah, this is okay. If those leaves separate, it is a split twin leaf.
Right. That's what we just say. A regular, you have the center leaf that just opened up.
I'm not sure if that's what he means. I think the lulav with its central twin leaf split is a lulav with 2 leaves at the top, unlike the standard lulav. No, so this is Teves. This is what I thought he was going to quote. So the Teves over here learns, and that's what I was expecting, that it's talking about where you have a lulav. Normally, the way a lulav ends, the end of the spine of the lulav branches into three parts. There's the right, the left, and the middle. The middle one is called the tiyomis. There are some times, and I found, so it's not uncommon, that a lulav branches into 4. Normally it branches into 3, but sometimes it branches into 4. When it branches into 4, there's one on the left, one on the right, and then there's 2 in the middle, 2 double leaves, 2 twin leaves. And that's the way Teves learns that those 2 leaves normally have some type of a brownish attachment that attaches these 2 twin leaves. Both of them, 2 means actually altogether 4, because there's 2 double leaves that are attached together. Now, what the Gemara is asking is nechlaka to yomis, if that splits, if those leaves split. Now I'm going to go back to his commentary here over it. So on the second column, if those leaves split, it is a split twin. It is a split twin leaf. What he means is that's the case of nechlaka hatiyomis. That's what the Gemara means, that the central twin leaf is split. It means the double leaf, the quadruple leaf. I would call it a quadruple leaf, if you don't mind. And so that's the way he's explaining. That's what he says from the Goinim and the Beishay, but that's really the what the Teves says. Okay, now then he says, yet others explain that the twin leaf is the connection between the 2 parts of a double leaf of the double leaves. According to this opinion, every leaf has a twin leaf, and some explain that it is unfit only if majority of the double leaves of the lulav have split. Others maintain that the word twin leaf in the singular indicates only one twin leaf of the lulav, and therefore it must refer to any of the leaves or to one specific leaf, but not to all of them. Some explain that the twin leaf refers to the top leaf of the lulav, since that one is most recognizable as doubled. And that's what I was mentioning earlier. If that leaf, this is the way Rashi, if that leaf splits, the lulav is unfit. According to this opinion, the legal status of the top of the lulav is equivalent to that of the top of the esrog, in a sense that its beauty is most prominently manifest there, and any flaws renders it unfit. Alternatively, a flaw on the center leaf renders the taking of the lulav an incomplete taking. So these are 2 explanations of why you would learn, like Rashi, that the center lulav is the most important one, and that's the way. That's what we were explaining before. That nechlaka tiyomis really means the center, the center leaf, that it's split, and that's different than the previous cases of nistak. Because the case of nistak that we spoke earlier, that's where the majority of the leaves split, but not talking about the top one. But now we're talking about nechlaka tiyomis, specifically the middle top leaf. That one has a new law called nechlaka tiyomis. And that we're going to see now in the Gemara what the law is with nechlaka tiyomis. And Rabbi Steinsaltz brought these other interpretations, which is basically Teves, and there are a few others that it could maybe it's referring to what we learned before as nistak. Maybe that's the way nechlaka tiyomis you could learn is similar to the way we learned nistak before, that is talking about many leaves or one specific leaf, but it's not necessarily talking about the top one. Rashi learns it's talking about the top middle leaf. That's called the tiyomis, and that's split. And the Gemara concludes here that it's the Gemara, at least in the second language, the second Gemara, you know what, let's just take an extra minute if you don't mind, and I'm just going to read through the Gemara. Tashema Damar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Masan, Rabbi Shimon Levi, Nitla Tiyamis Puzzle. He says if it's nitla, if the tiyamis is removed, that leaf is removed, it's invalid. My lav who had the nechlaka, the same thing should apply if it's split. That's the first. That's the Gemara's assumption. The Gemara says, "Lai, who says it's the same? Nitla shani. Maybe if you remove it, it's different. The chasale, it's removed. You're missing. It's missing now, that the leaf. If it's there, but it just split, maybe it's kosher. So the first way of learning the Gemara is we don't know yet if it's kosher or puzzle. There's room to say that maybe it's kosher. Only if you remove that middle leaf, it's invalid. If it's still there, it's split, maybe that's kosher. Ikadeami, some say that Amar Reb Masan, Amar Reb Shimon Levi, that they specifically spoke about this case, and he said nechlaka tiyamis nasik mishmidla tiyamis upuzzle. It's similar to that. He specifically says that it's similar to removing it, that if it's split, it's similar to removing it and it's invalid. So bottom line is nechlach hatiyamis is, according to the Ika de Amri, is invalid, and we'll have to see what the halacha, which we seem to see that it's going to be invalid, but this is a common issue with lulavim, especially after you used it a few times. It often breaks in that area. Anyway, have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone. Sei gesund.
Enough
Thank
to
you, Rabbi.
review over
Thank you,
Shabbos.
Rabbi.
Okay.
Good Shabbos,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you all.